For much of pre-season, the narrative around 2026 felt straightforward. Mercedes were the clear favourites, and everyone else was playing catch-up. Their long-run consistency, stable new-generation car, and the sense of quiet confidence inside the team all pointed to a package that had grasped the regulations earlier than its rivals. Even when Ferrari topped the times in Bahrain, the dominant interpretation barely shifted. The assumption was simple: Mercedes were sandbagging, running conservative programs, and holding back the real performance for Melbourne. But the problem with that narrative is not what Mercedes may be hiding, it is what Ferrari have already shown. They did not look like a team waiting for the season to start, they looked like one ready to race immediately. Their pace was only part of the story. What stood out more was the completeness of the package. Exceptionally strong starts under the new procedures, efficient energy deployment, and radical aerodynamic solutions aimed directly at the demands of the 2026 rules. In an era where energy management and launch performance could dictate track position from the moment the lights go out, those strengths carry disproportionate weight. If Ferrari can secure clean getaways and control the early phases of a race, even a fundamentally faster car behind may struggle to recover the lost ground. In other words, Ferrari may not need to be the outright quickest, only the most effective where it matters most. So if Mercedes really are holding a significant performance margin in reserve for Melbourne, will that automatically make them unbeatable? Or has Ferrari already built the tools to neutralize that advantage from the very first lap? If you want to understand why Ferrari could pose the most serious threat to Mercedes' favourite status this season, consider subscribing so you don't miss the full analysis coming up next. Because once the Bahrain data is examined beyond headline lap times, Ferrari's case becomes far more compelling. Charles Leclerc ended testing with the fastest overall lap, a 1 minute 31.992 seconds, and did so on a program that combined both qualifying style runs and longer stints. On paper, that alone might not be decisive. Testing times are notoriously unreliable indicators, but the surrounding context matters. Ferrari's advantage was not built on a single low-fuel attempt or a perfect track window. It was supported by visible strengths across multiple performance domains. Perhaps the most striking of those domains was race starts. Under the new 2026 procedures, which place far greater emphasis on managing turbo speed, electrical deployment, and clutch synchronization, Ferrari appeared consistently ahead of the curve. Lewis Hamilton's practice launches drew particular attention, including one in which he surged from deep in the order to the front. George Russell openly admitted concern, stating that his own starts during testing were worse than any he had made in Formula One. "To win a race, you've also got to get off the line quite well," he said, adding that Hamilton had gone from 11th to 1st in a start simulation. This matters because the new regulations amplify the consequences of a poor getaway. Drivers must effectively prepare the power unit for several seconds to avoid turbo lag, and small errors can produce dramatic performance differences. Russell described the challenge as the tallest hurdle at this stage, a notable admission from the driver widely considered Mercedes' title spearhead. By contrast, Ferrari's apparent ease suggested not just a good launch map, but a coherent integration between engine, energy systems, and chassis. The explanation may lie partly in architecture. Ferrari's use of a smaller turbo, requiring less energy to spin up, has been cited as a possible factor in their responsiveness off the line. If true, that is not something rivals can simply replicate with software adjustments. It is a fundamental design choice embedded within the power unit itself. Energy deployment more broadly was another area of intrigue. Russell noted that Red Bull appeared to have the best deployment overall, describing it as scary, but acknowledged that Mercedes-powered teams had made significant gains during the test. Even so, Ferrari's efficiency remained evident in both single-lap pace and sustained running. In an era where the power unit output is split roughly evenly between electrical and combustion sources, the ability to conserve and redeploy energy strategically could determine overtaking potential, defensive capability, and tyre management. Ferrari's aerodynamic philosophy reinforced that impression of systemic thinking. The team introduced one of the most aggressive technical concepts seen in the paddock, a rear wing whose flaps rotate dramatically in straight-line mode, effectively reorienting the assembly to /drag. Early telemetry suggested a gain of around 8 to 10 kilometers per hour, but engineers indicated the real objective was energy saving rather than outright speed. By reducing drag so significantly, the car requires less electrical deployment to achieve competitive velocity, preserving energy for later in the lap or for defensive situations. Technically, the concept is far from a bolt-on upgrade. It demands extensive internal packaging changes, including gearbox layout adjustments, making rapid imitation by competitors unlikely. More importantly, it aligns directly with the central challenge of the 2026 rules, balancing efficiency, stability, and energy consumption across an entire stint, rather than chasing peak performance in isolation. There were also indications that Ferrari had addressed braking stability, historically a sensitive area for Hamilton during the ground effect era. Observers noted that the revised diffuser and exhaust configuration could help stabilize the rear of the car under deceleration, potentially allowing drivers to brake later and with greater confidence. Ruth Buscombe described the diffuser as a really clever concept, suggesting it might bring the car closer to Hamilton's preferred characteristics. Hamilton himself struck a cautiously positive tone. He explained that this car felt fundamentally different from the one he had driven previously, emphasizing that he had been involved in its development on the simulator for many months. "A bit of my DNA is within it," he said, adding that he felt more connected to the package. That sense of ownership can be critical in a regulatory reset, where driver feedback plays a large role in refining balance and drivability. Yet Ferrari's test was not flawless. Hamilton lost significant track time due to a chassis issue, completing only 5 laps during one session. He also appeared to lack complete confidence in the front end during high-speed runs, with Ivan Capelli observing that he had not yet found the right feeling to achieve consistent smoothness. Charles Leclerc, by comparison, looked more comfortable, reinforcing the idea that Ferrari's potential may depend on how quickly Hamilton completes his adaptation. Meanwhile, Mercedes' strengths were real but different in character. Their long-run pace was widely regarded as excellent, with consistent lap times in the mid-1 minute 35 seconds range during race simulations. Kimi Antonelli produced one of the standout laps of the test, a 1 minute 32.803 seconds, demonstrating that the car possessed genuine speed. The atmosphere within the team was described as calm and confident, a stark contrast to previous seasons of uncertainty. However, there were also signs that Mercedes' performance profile might be less robust in the specific areas emphasized by the new rules. Top speed figures suggested a more conservative energy deployment strategy, with Russell reportedly around 8 kilometers per hour slower than Leclerc on the main straight during comparable runs. If that deficit reflects deliberate management rather than limitation, it may disappear in qualifying conditions. But if it indicates a structural difference in efficiency, the implications could extend far beyond testing. Crucially, even Mercedes insiders appeared wary of drawing firm conclusions. Russell highlighted Red Bull's deployment advantage and warned that limited practice time in Melbourne could leave teams exposed if they had not fully mastered the systems. 3 hours of running before qualifying offers little margin for troubleshooting complex energy and launch procedures. All of this feeds into a broader question about what constitutes readiness in a new regulatory era. Raw pace is only one component. Reliability, operational confidence, and the ability to execute under pressure are equally important. Ferrari's test suggested a team that had aligned these elements effectively, even if outright dominance remained unproven. The psychological dimension should not be overlooked either. After a disappointing 2025 campaign, Ferrari entered 2026 with tempered expectations but visible internal cohesion. There was little of the over-exuberance that had characterized previous strong winters. Instead, the tone from team principal Frédéric Vasseur and the drivers was measured optimism, an awareness of potential without premature claims. By contrast, the assumption that Mercedes would inevitably prevail created a form of narrative inertia. Once established, such expectations can persist, even when evidence becomes ambiguous. Ferrari's Bahrain performance did not conclusively dethrone Mercedes as favourites, but it introduced sufficient uncertainty to make the outcome far less predictable. Ultimately, the opening race in Melbourne will provide the first meaningful data point under competitive conditions. Testing cannot replicate the pressure of parc fermé, the chaos of the first corner, or the strategic complexity of a full Grand Prix. But it can reveal which teams have constructed packages capable of operating effectively across the new technical landscape. Ferrari appear to have done exactly that. They may not possess an overwhelming speed advantage, and Mercedes may indeed have performance in reserve. Yet the evidence from Bahrain suggests that Ferrari have targeted the areas most likely to decide races in 2026. If those priorities prove correct, the team once viewed as the challenger could arrive in Australia as something much closer to an equal, or even the benchmark. So the real question is not whether Mercedes were sandbagging, but whether it will matter. If Ferrari can dominate the launch phase, manage energy more efficiently, and maintain strategic control from the front, raw pace alone may not be enough to dislodge them. Do you think Ferrari have genuinely shifted the balance of power heading into 2026? Or will Mercedes reassert themselves the moment the season begins? Let me know your view in the comments below.